Today I have travelled down to Telford, where I am giving a talk at the Oaken Gates Theatre, and I've taken this opportunity to meet up with Dave Hodrian. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks very much.
And Dave is the chairman of Birmingham UFO Group. About a year ago, I was getting a lot of UFO cases reported to me via my website, and I was getting far too many that I was able to deal with. So I tried to find somebody who's trustworthy, who could deal with these cases, and I contacted Dave and showed me the Birmingham UFO Group website, which I was very impressed with. Yeah. And just give us a domain name first, Dave.
It's www.B.U.F.O.G.com, B.U.F.O.G.
Okay, and on that website I discovered that you had a mechanism by which people could give their UFO and contact experiences over to you via a contact form.
Yeah.
So basically I just plagiarized that, put it on my own website, and then forward the information to yourself.
Yes.
And although I've got visibility of that, I get to see all of these reports, I've effectively offloaded it onto yourself.
Yeah.
And over the last year we've had probably over 100 cases.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you've picked out the most interesting ones that we're going to go through today.
Yes.
Now, just give us a bit about your background first, Dave, and how you got into this subject.
Right. I've been interested in the paranormal since quite an early age, really. Mm-hmm. Started off with just everything, really: UFOs, ghosts, mm-hmm. Psychic abilities, the whole works. Right. Read a lot of paranormal books, but from about the age of 11 or 12, I started to get more of an interest specifically in the UFO subject. Right. Started reading about cases and thinking that there seemed to be quite a good amount of evidence to back them up. Right. And the cases that I read about, the witnesses seemed straight up about what they'd seen. Mm-hmm. So I started looking into it in more depth. I started going to UFO conferences from about the age of 16. Right. The first one I went to was the UFO magazine conference, which was being held in Surrey Hall, where I live. So that was very suitable. Mm-hmm. And I've been to them pretty much yearly ever since. Right. And it's just kind of gone on from there.
Right. So how old are you now, Dave?
I'm 33 at the moment.
Right. Okay. So it goes right back to your childhood, the interest.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. And you're the chairman.
Yes.
So you tell me about your wedding at the Black Mailbox and visit to UFO Congress.
Yes, this is in February 2010. Right. We decided, myself and my wife decided that rather than have a normal white wedding across here, right, we would take a trip across America, okay, go visit Las Vegas, and also go to the UFO Congress in Laughlin, which is about 80 miles away. It's something I've always wanted to visit. It's the one of the world's biggest UFO conferences, a week-long event. Right. So it seemed suitable that we go across there. Right. And as it was near Nevada, of course, we decided to also go out to visit the base. And we decided we would get married next to the Black Mailbox, just on the outskirts of Area 51.
Right. And how did your wife feel about that?
She's the one who came up with the idea.
Oh, really?
A lot of people say that, yeah. I was talking about having a pretty much normal wedding, yeah, and she rang me up and said, "No, I found this thing online, right, where a company will come and pick us up from the hotel, drive us out to the base, show us both the gates, we'll go visit the little alien, yeah. Oh, yeah, the famous motel, yeah. Yes." And also get us married at the Black Mailbox.
Good.
Took a few hours to come around to the idea, but right, yeah, absolutely hooked on it then, and no stopping us.
Right. So you had a good time then?
It was superb, absolutely right, wonderful week, yeah.
Okay. Out of the 100 or so cases that we've had reported so far, and anyone who wishes to report a case to RichPlanet.net, just click on the Submit a Sighting or Experience link, and you can send your report, and I'll get a copy, and Dave gets a copy. As I say, out of the 100 or so reports that we've had, we've picked out some of the best. Yes. And many of these are multiple witness cases. You know, there's more than one witness that Dave's been able to check up on. And the other thing that amazes me is the time spread of these cases that have been reported, because they're not just recent. Some of them go back to the 1940s. And there's some in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Just about every decade has got a spread of UFO cases. So people are reporting cases that has stuck in their mind from 30, 40 years ago. In absolutely. Some cases, which is, in fact, I would say that the majority of the cases are historical in some way, rather than yes, just recent ones. Yes. In particular, the first case, June 1991, mm-hmm, which took place in Blackmill in South Wales, and South
Yes.
Wales being a hotspot,
Yes.
Bridgend.
Indeed.
You care to tell us about that one, Dave?
Yeah, yeah, it's an absolutely stunning case. This, first of all, there's multiple witnesses involved, and also what they saw was quite impressive, both in its look and the movement pattern. It was 6:30 p.m. in the evening, and
So
it was
broad daylight.
yes, it was. Yeah, it was just. Sun was just starting to set. There was a man, his wife, and two friends, and they were out to visit a local Indian restaurant on the outskirts of Blackmill. And they were on the A4093, and what they were doing, they were driving down a shallow hill. There was a bit of other traffic around, not too many cars. And opposite them was a number of farmers' fields on another slope facing the other way. And they saw a very, very brightly glowing silver sphere. The light coming off this thing was absolutely massive. It was, you said it looked like an arc welding torch. Okay. The object was about 150 to 200 feet in the air, but they could see the hill behind it. So it wasn't a very distant object. They could tell that it was in front of the hill, so quite low down.
We've got 4 witnesses then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they all saw the object. They were absolutely stunned by it, by the look and the brightness coming off this thing, and it was just hovering there. It wasn't completely still. It was actually wobbling a bit, right, which I've actually had that mentioned in other cases I've looked into. Some people, myself included, believe that might be the field that the object surrounds itself with, that allows it to hover and perform manoeuvres in our atmosphere. So
one of the witnesses used the F word.
Yes, he said, "What the effing hell's that?"
Yeah.
And then the other witnesses. So he was the first one to see it as they came down the hill.
Right. Okay.
So they looked at this object, and it was there wobbling left to right a bit for about 20 seconds, and then without warning, the thing shot off in a southwesterly direction. Absolutely incredible speed. He said hundreds of miles an hour. It was gone in a second. They all saw it go.
Right.
Obviously, that means it can't have been anything normal or conventional in any way. It can't have been a floating balloon or some sort of other vehicle or normal aircraft like a helicopter. The speed was absolutely incredible. It shocked them all quite a lot, and they went out and had their meal, but they were quite quiet for the majority of the evening because they were all thinking about what they'd seen, and realised that it didn't fit into anything normal or conventional in any way.
And some key characteristics there, Dave. The light, the intense light, which
Yes.
is very common.
Indeed.
And the dynamics.
Although not so common in daylight hours, it's quite interesting
Right.
that it was glowing brightly in daylight hours.
Right.
Because usually these craft tend to glow after dark.
Right.
When they're in daylight, they're usually just sort of solid silver or other colours. So it's interesting. But it was starting to get to dusk, so it would have picked up the brightness. It was extremely bright.
And the acceleration again is another characteristic which we'll see.
Yeah, it's a decider for me, that one. I actually look at the movement of these objects sometimes more than the actual appearance, because looks can of course be deceiving, and something which looks like a hovering object could in fact just be nothing more than a blimp or a balloon at a distance. However, when the thing shot off at that speed, that put all those explanations out of the question, I found.
All right. Okay, then Dave, let's come on to the next case, which
Yes.
is near my neck of the woods, Bedlington, Northumberland.
Yeah.
Fairly recent, the 12th of May 2010.
Yes.
The good points were that it was a close encounter, the appearance, possible direct interaction.
Absolutely, yeah. This was a lady who had decided to buy one of these astronomy laser pointers that you fire up at the sky to point out stars, and she'd watched.
So that's like a green laser beam that you
Yes.
can buy. Does that sit on a tripod then, or?
No, it's a handheld.
Right.
It's a handheld device. You can shine it up into the sky like you would a powerful torch.
Right.
And it goes out quite a distance. You can see the line, and
Right.
it's used by astronomers usually to sort of point out individual star systems.
Right.
Now she'd watched a number of clips on the internet, night vision clips, apparently showing people communicating with UFOs using these devices. They were shining them up, and there were objects high up, very high altitude, that appeared to be flashing in response to what they were doing with the pointers. I've no idea of the. I'm aware of a number of researchers who've released videos such as that, but as I don't know exactly which one, I won't mention any names there. So she decided to get one of these and try this out. She didn't have a massive interest in the UFO field or anything, but she saw these videos and she thought, why not? I'll get hold of one of these devices and try it out myself. Right. So It got to the evening of the 12th of May, and it was a very clear evening. It was the first clear evening that it had been since she'd bought the device. It was quite late. It was early in the early hours of the morning, yes. And about 1:20 a.m. And family were asleep upstairs. She decided to head out into the back garden to try out this thing, and she ended up at the sky, clear stars and moon fully visible, and she flashed it a couple of times. At first there wasn't anything occurred, but after a short amount of time she suddenly heard a noise coming from off to her right, from in the direction of the next door neighbours. Sounded like somebody whirring a cord around very, very fast in circles, sort of a kind of whirring, pulsing type of noise. She turned around to see what it was and was absolutely astounded by what she saw. There over the neighbour's garden, hovering about 100 feet in the air, was a large black boomerang-shaped object. It had 5 green lights on the base of the object, right along both parts of it.
The apex of the boomerang, yes. And along the, well, we call them wings.
Yes, separated out underneath. Okay. It had curved, smooth surface and was jet black in colour. It's blocking out the stars. It was about 50 foot in diameter. Right. Obviously, the size of this thing, she was absolutely shocked. She believed that it was directly related to her clicking the laser pointer, which you'd have to assume was probably the case. Right. It's interesting that the colour of the lights underneath were green, I find, because the colour of the laser pointer was also green. And does that designate that it changed the lights to that colour to indicate that? Possibly, possibly not. Yeah, I've got a drawing of what she saw. There it is.
And she was so freaked out by this, she couldn't get back to sleep. She told her husband about it, who wasn't really that interested. So no. She pursued it, and she rang a friend at the early hours in the morning.
Yes, she has a night shift, and she decided to ring her friend in the early hours of the morning to tell him what she'd just seen, because she was quite hysterical, and obviously, as most people would be, she didn't want to go back to bed. She did see the object start to move away from the area. She watched it for a short period of time, about 10 seconds, and it started to turn on a diagonal. On a flat, and
so it sort of slowly turned through 45 degrees like this.
No, not like that, like that.
Oh, so it turned in that plane.
So it changed direction. Yeah.
It changed direction.
Yes, like it was going to head away, but it didn't turn towards her. It seemed to turn away from her.
All right.
At this point, she became absolutely terrified and ran back inside the house.
Right.
She has no idea of how long the craft remained in the area for.
Right.
If that's what it was, I call it craft. It seems to be. It seems to be a craft of some kind.
Right, and you verified the phone call with the person.
I did, yes. Yeah, I got in touch, and sure enough, he verified that she'd rang up in the middle of the night, right. and told him about the craft. She actually said to him that she was scared she was going to be taken by this craft, and she said, "If I go missing, you'll know what's happened to me." Right. She was actually scared it was going to come back and take her. Didn't actually do that, at least to her knowledge, and and that's essentially that.
And this obviously a different shape to your classic flying saucer.
Oh, absolutely.
The boomerang, as she described.
Yes.
It. And they do seem to fall into 3 or 4 broad categories. You've got your disc or dome disc, and then you've got triangular craft, which I think flying triangle, which we've got an example of, and then this is boomerang shaped.
Yeah.
And then. What would the other shapes be?
Just spheres, generally.
Spheres of light.
Either silver in colour in daylight or after dark, glowing various colours. Yeah.
Right. All right. Now let's come on to the next one.
Sure.
Which is from 1987, Lingen Golf Club. Well, this is in the States. This one,
yes.
Nova Scotia.
Yes.
Care to tell us some information about this, Dave?
Yes, this is an absolutely fascinating case. It was a stunning close encounter. There was two men involved, and there was also military involvement. What happened? This one didn't come from the actual witness. One of the 2 witnesses involved in this case has actually died, unfortunately, and it does seem that his death was related to his close encounter with these objects.
Right. Yeah, this guy unfortunately died, and the survivors, or the other guy who witnessed it, believes it was because of this UFO sighting.
Yes, so, yeah, the man's family and also the gentleman who got in touch with me who I'll call John. It's not his actual name, but
right.
What happened was his friend and this other man, they were out playing golf. It was a bright, clear and sunny day at 2 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. This was on a day in August 1987.
Yes.
Obviously that far back, he can't remember the exact date this happened on. They just happened to glance up into the sky and were met by an absolutely fascinating sight. They saw two pewter silver coloured, classic looking flying discs with a domed top that had what appeared to be darkened round portholes around the dome.
Right. And you've done an impression of that one based on their description?
Yes,
yeah?
I have. Yes.
All right.
This is a drawing of what the man described and what he had, what the witness had described to him.
And there was two of these identical.
There was, yeah,
right,
and they were moving in tandem with each other. They were completely moving together and heading in their direction across the golf course. And they looked into the distance, and much further away were three jets. There were CF-18 jet fighters. The man recognised these because he was interested in aviation.
Right.
So he knew what type of jets there were. There were several CF-18 jets, and they appeared to be closing in. They were on interception path, and were trying to intercept these two sources. They started to get quite close to the UFOs, and at this point, the two craft flew extremely fast and came right above the heads of the two witnesses over the golf course. Now, whether they stopped there because the witnesses were there is unknown.
Right.
Up close, they looked up and saw the underside of the craft, and there was a ring of revolving white pulsing lights that were going around, and around that there was an outer ring that was metal that was also revolving in a clockwise direction.
Right.
They could sense static in the air. It felt like energetic in the air, which has been reported in quite a few
Many
close
times,
encounters,
yeah.
including the famous Rendlesham incident, of course, by Jim Penniston. So yeah, that fitted in with certainly fitted in with other close encounters. So they stared at the objects for a short amount of time, and the jets began to close in again. At this point, the two craft suddenly shot straight upwards and then went off at a right angle and shot away to the right at incredible speed. Again, just like the sighting for Blackmill.
Right. All right, and Dave, I'm going to interrupt you there because we're going to go for a short break.
Sure.
But more on the RichPlanet and B.U.F.O.G UFO cases after this. Welcome back on board the Starship. I'm talking with Dave Hodrian, and we are in Telford. Now then, Dave, we were just discussing a case from Nova Scotia.
Yes.
What year was that? That was 1987.
1987, yeah.
Now this guy, his friend died, and he believes that it was due to this sighting of this UFO.
Yes.
Now, so, I mean, did the other guy get burned at all?
No, they didn't suffer any physical ailments at the time, other than feeling this static charge coming from the objects. And
was the person who died, were his symptoms indicative of radiation then?
Yeah, there were, yeah. I've been asked not to reveal too many details about that illness, but they do appear to be radiation related.
Right.
The symptoms started occurring about 6 to 8 months after his experience.
Right.
And it was a short time after that one evening he got together all his best friends, including the man who contacted me, and told them all what happened. The man who got in touch with me, he said that his friend was very straight up, very fact-based man. He wouldn't have made up any story of such magnitude. He also said he was extremely animated as he was turning the tail, and obviously appeared to still be in shock because of what he'd seen.
Right.
But he started to develop these symptoms, and about 6 months later, he unfortunately died. He went to his grave believing that his illness was related to what he'd seen, as did the man's family and the other witness.
And are you aware of any other cases where this sort of thing has happened, or radiation?
Yes, yeah. There was another case I looked into where a man got quite close to a silver disc. This one came through the B.U.F.O.G website a while back, and he had a close encounter with a large silver disc. And strange enough, over a golf course again, and he returned home, and he came in and he looked like he'd been dragged through a hedge backwards, and he just went into the lounge, lay down, and just lay back in the armchair. And his daughter came in and said, "What's wrong?" absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
And what he said to her was, "I've just seen a UFO, but I'm scared I'm going to forget about it." That's the words he used. He then got very, very tired and dropped off to sleep. In the morning, he couldn't actually remember the experience.
Right.
But when he looked in the mirror, he had what looked like suntan, like strong sunburn down one side of his back and on one arm.
Right.
His daughter told him that was related to what he'd seen, but he didn't buy it. He completely forgot the experience.
So, can you remember which country that was, Dave?
That was across here in the UK.
Oh, it was in the UK.
Yeah, it's a UK case.
Right. Okay. So beware if you're a golfer. All right then, Dave. Well, let's move on to another case. This time back to the UK in Stafford, late summer in 2000.
Yes.
Carry on, I'll let you describe it.
Sure, yeah. Okay, this is a flying triangle case. We've had quite a few flying triangle cases come to the site right up to the present day.
Now, just before you go on there, Dave.
Yes.
There are alleged American undisclosed secret military flying triangles. One of them is called the TR-3B, as disclosed by Edgar Fouché, and it's supposed to be 600 feet long. Right, this thing with a glowing, or with a rotating superfluid, which it's allegedly anti-gravity, and a lot of skeptics, they pass off people's possible ET sightings of triangles as military vehicles.
Yes.
And also, you've got the stealth, they're all triangular in
Absolutely.
shape, so I guess we've got to bear that in mind when people see triangles.
Certainly, yeah.
And the triangular craft do seem to have only become prevalent from probably the early 1980s onwards,
Yes.
I would say.
Yeah, recent decades, definitely.
So I would say with triangles more so, it's potential military.
Yeah,
but then again, the military are supposed to have possibly even developed discs. I don't know, but we can maybe come on to that towards the end of the interview.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. There is a number of specific reasons why I believe that at least some of these FTs, as they're known, are alien. I have had some cases which have directly linked them with extraterrestrial, non-human creatures.
And generally it's to do with an abduction.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so let's carry on with this one. So summer 2000.
Okay, so this again, there was multiple witnesses involved. This is a man who was out with his family in his parents' car, and he was sitting in the back. He had his wife and child there in the back with him, and his two parents were in the front, so they'd just been on a family day out. And they're on their way home through Stafford town centre. It was early evening. The sun was still up. It was just starting to set. Very, very pleasant sunny day with a very light cloud. And there were some other cars around, but because it was a Sunday afternoon or Sunday early evening, it was relatively quiet.
Okay.
And they pulled up at traffic lights at a crossroads, and the crossroads was Riverway and Western Road. That's the names of the two roads where they're at. Right. And they were just sitting at a red light. And he suddenly noticed out the left window, off to his left, a white light in the sky. And it just caught at the corner of his eye. And he looked round at it, and the white light remained there for a second and then went off. A moment later, it came back on, but it was a bit closer. And then it went off again. Did it again. Again, it was a bit closer. This time, however, it remained on. Then a second light came on, down and to the right of it. And then to the left of it was a reddish-orange light came on that looked a bit bigger and also a bit dimmer than the white lights. Right. Finally, another white light came on to the left of the orange-red light, and anybody that knows flying triangles will know what's coming next. Yeah, the remainder of the craft exposed it, so it decloaked essentially, and it just filled in, and right there was a flying triangle craft essentially.
Now, that. I interviewed Omar Fowler, you know of Omar Fowler, he's researched flying triangles. Now, I'm not sure if this is the same case, I need to check this out, but he described a very similar case to that to me, but the witness was an expert on aircraft. This isn't the same case then?
No.
It sounds very similar.
Yeah.
What you described there is there being some preliminary lights coming on and off, and then suddenly the triangle appearing around it. That was exactly what he described.
He was out with his family near Hinckley in Leicestershire, and this was March 1999. And they'd all been out to dinner, I think, to celebrate somebody's birthday. There was his mother and wife and children and so on in the car. And they were driving down an old Roman road called Foss Way, when in the distance they saw some red lights. And as they got closer, he became curious about this, and they pulled to the side of the road and looked up, and they saw the lights, and then strangely a flying triangle structure developed around these lights, which brings into this business of interdimensional. Where did it come from?
So what happened then?
Yeah, okay, so he was absolutely stunned by this, and straight away he thought, this has got to be a UFO, it's got to be something out of the ordinary. Believed it was an alien craft. And and straight away he shouted at everybody to tell them about the object so they could also see it. So he turned around and told his wife, his kid, his parents, and they all start looking at the windows to the left, but inexplicably they couldn't see the object. He was trying to point it out to them, and it was quite clear. It was up in the sky. It wasn't too distant. It wasn't close, but it wasn't right on the horizon either. And they couldn't see it. And he was a bit frustrated that they couldn't see this. And then he decided he wanted to take a photograph of this. And he realised his camera was in the glove box of the car in the front. So he leaned forward and asked his mum to have the camera. And at this point, he described something very strange happening. He said that it seemed like time had slowed down, and he could hear his mum talking in slow motion to him. Right. And she was telling him, no, she wouldn't hand him the camera. She seemed adamant that he couldn't have the camera off her. Right. And in the end, he tried to reach past her to get it himself, and she actually pushed him away, pushed him back, wouldn't give him the camera. Right. He said that this seemed to go on for several minutes, but it could have been a short amount of time. It was just essentially while the lights were red and then they went green. He said his father's quite a careful driver usually, but when the lights went green, his father just sped off, absolutely wheel spun the car, and sped away as fast as he could across the crossroads and carrying on down the road. And at this point, he realised that the object was going to go out of sight, and he started shouting at them, stop the car, I want to get out the car. And they actually wouldn't let him out the car, they refused to let him out. Right. So they carried on driving. They eventually arrived home, and he asked them, why did you do that? Why would you not stop and let me out? Why would you not let me have the camera? And nobody in the car, except him, could remember seeing the object. Had complete memory loss of the incident. Right.
So could they remember speeding away fast from the lights?
No, all they could remember, the last thing that they remembered was being at the lights and waiting for the lights to change.
So it's as if we had just suppose what might have happened there, the craft has somehow mind-controlled everyone except him in the car.
Yes, yeah. That seems to be
whatever they've done has had no effect on him, perhaps.
Yes, yeah. Well, obviously, because he was the first to see it, they hadn't had time to activate that, or they were stopping directly him from getting any physical evidence of it, like say a photograph. Yeah. That seems to be the most logical answer, really, to what he described. Yeah. They remembered the rest of the journey home afterwards. And he didn't talk about it on the way back to the house, as far as I'm aware. But when they got there, he then opened up on them and said, "Why didn't you let me out the car?" Right. And they couldn't remember doing that. They couldn't remember not letting him out, and they couldn't remember not letting him have the camera. Right. So it's quite a fascinating case. Yeah. And 2 weeks later, they were looking in the local newspaper. It was the local Stafford newspaper. I think the witness does not remember the actual name of the paper. And there was an article in there mentioning a sighting of a black triangle UFO that was seen by 2 police officers, apparently, over the Staffordshire Police Headquarters, which was quite close. It was about 1.5 miles away from where he'd had the sighting. So it seems to be related. Probably the craft was moving around the area.
Well, we've got time for one more before we go to the break, which this time is in Scotland, at one of the most notorious places for UFO sightings, near Bonnybridge. Yes. This was at Abron Hill, is that the correct pronunciation?
That's right, yes,
in
district.
Cumbernauld of Glasgow.
Yes.
So tell us about that one, Dave.
Yeah, this one's yes, part of the what's known as the Falkirk Triangle, which includes this area and Bonnybridge and other areas, other towns in the area. And it's widely believed that there's a lot of activity around this particular area. Somebody's mapped it out and it's a rough triangular shape. I don't know whether that means anything, probably not. But essentially, there's a lot of UFO sightings around that area. So it's quite fascinating that it came from this area. So this again is quite a stunning sighting. It was 7:45 in the evening, and there's a man. He was in his apartment in Abram Hill. He was just sitting there watching TV. He was on the second floor, so he had a good view. Had big windows at the end of the lounge overlooking the local area. And suddenly there was a very bright white light came in the window of his lounge, and of course he jumped straight to his feet and ran over to the window to see what was going on. And he looked up, and 150 feet above, going over the roof of his apartment, was a very brightly glowing white object. Now, at first he couldn't see the shape of it because of the intensity of the light coming off it, but as it continued to move away, he saw that it was a disc. It was a disc with a rounded dome in the middle. Very similar shape, in fact, to the Nova Scotia case.
Right. You've got an artist's impression.
Again, yeah, I've done I did that drawing based on his description. I sent through numerous shapes to him, and he said that was the one that matched.
Right.
What he
Okay.
saw.
So you've got corroboration from him that that was the shape.
Yes.
Fine.
So the whole thing was glowing brightly. You couldn't see any markings on it, any windows, any lines, anything like that. It was just the shape. It was just a disc with a rounded dome. And it was moving away about 40 miles an hour and heading away from him to the south over Abram Hill. Now, it was quite... there wasn't many people around. It was quite a cold evening. He didn't see anybody on the street outside. But the fact that it had seemingly passed right across Abram Hill, it's possible that there were other witnesses there.
Right.
That I don't know about. Nobody else has come forward based on the report.
Okay. And just before we go to the break, Dave,
Yes.
you mentioned there the triangle. Sorry, what was the name that you said?
Falkirk Triangle.
There's a Welsh triangle as well in southwest Wales.
And the Bermuda Triangle, of course.
the Bermuda Triangle, of course. Now, I mean, there are other hotspots in places there, such as Todmorden.
Yes.
In the Pennines. Do you know of any other hotspots in the UK? I mean, there's three that I know of.
I've heard of Carlton Moor in Yorkshire,
right?
Where Ilkley Moor, where the man had the sighting and the photograph of the ET.
Right.
Entity. And that's also where Tony Dodd, the famous late researcher, he had numerous sightings up there.
Right. And do you have any thoughts on the reasons for there being hotspots?
No, only that sometimes a hotspot can exist for a number of years and then it can seemingly die down.
Right.
Like I have heard of numerous people that the area of Bonnybridge now is actually, they don't get as many UFO sightings as they used to.
Right.
Soon to be in the 90s, they got a whole influx of sightings. Same with the Warminster area down in Wiltshire. They had a lot of sightings in the late 70s, mid 80s sort of time, but now sightings have died down there.
Now, before we continue with Dave Hodrian's UFO files, if you are interested in the UFO subject, which everybody should be, then the place to go is the Leeds 2011 Exopolitics Conference. Now, that takes place at Leeds University on the 5th, 6th and 7th of August, where myself and many others will be speaking, some of whom have been on this show. RichPlanet.net is sponsoring the conference, so why not make a weekend of it and get yourself along. Now, before we go to the break, it's time for this week's light-hearted interlude with The Poet in the Pub. Now, most of The Poet in the Pub's material is not broadcastable on television, and you can find details about his DVD on the RichPlanet.net website. So take it away, Poet in the Pub.
Charity ends at home. Charity workers, what are they worth? It's time to bring them down to earth. When they patronise me, they've already cooked their goose. And when they're getting in your face, tell them they're a waste of space. And don't stop there, point the finger and give them some abuse. Charity ends at home. Why don't these leave me alone? I always tell them to when they harass me on the phone. Bin bags through my letterbox. I like to fill them up with rocks. Tin rattlers saying, can you spare a few pence? Why are these people so full of themselves, thinking they're Santa's little elves? I just want to headbutt them and say it's self-defense. Because charity ends at home. You can't get blood from a stone. They put adverts on TV when I can't get a crisis loan. Don't tell me I don't understand. Their directors get 50 grand. Celebrities aid poverty by shoving money up their nose. Don't tell me it's my fault because you're asking for assault. They're covering the system's arse. That's the way it goes. Because charity ends at home. I'm only giving to my own. If you want 5 quid, honey, give me your trombone.
Welcome back on board the Starship. I'm talking to Dave Hodrian, who is chairman of Birmingham UFO Group, and we've been discussing some UFO cases, and we were talking about a case in the notorious Bonnybridge UFO hotspot, and you were just telling us about where this dome disc craft was and in which direction it was heading in.
Yes, so, absolutely. Yeah. He saw it heading off in a southerly direction, going quite a slow speed, about 40 miles an hour. He watched it for about a minute until it had gone out of sight.
Right.
So he just lost it outside behind buildings in the distance. So that was essentially the end of his sighting. He didn't run after it to the town to try and keep watching it. The following day, he went down to his local pub to meet up with a friend. And when he went down there, he had the intention of telling his friend about what he'd seen. Mm-hmm. But before he could, his friend actually said to him, "You're not going to believe what I saw last night." Mm-hmm. And he decided to hear his story about what he'd seen. And he was actually driving along. It's called Forest Road, and it runs along the south of Cumbernauld. It's along the south end of the town, and along one side of it is big area of forest. He was driving along this road about 8 o'clock, and he saw a bright white flash of light that seemed to change the whole forest into daylight for just for a second. Just flashed up really, really bright, and then it went back dark again. And he did that twice more. He saw it happen 3 times. Didn't see any craft or anything like that, but it's interesting that the light was extremely bright white. And when he asked him for the time, he said he'd been travelling about 8 o'clock. Man's sighting was at 7:45. Objects heading south. Right. That would absolutely fit to a dime with to what he saw. It was the direction the craft was heading in. So we can assume that it was probably the craft that were down there out in the forest.
Okay, and that was in 94, 95.
Yes. It's possible that there were other witnesses to that as well, the light flashes. Obviously, anybody driving along the road at that point probably would have spotted that because by that time it was starting to get dark. So yeah, it would have been made quite an impression.
Well, I mean, it's incredible that we've had so many, like just after a year, so many good cases coming through this, and I think it was round about that time that the MOD actually stopped taking cases. They closed their UFO desk, so to speak.
We've taken that mantle on.
Yeah, we've taken that mantle on. So it's B.U.F.O.G. Is it .org, Dave?
No, .com. B.U.F.O.G.com.
.com or RichPlanet.net if anyone wishes to report their UFO sighting or experience. I mean, I think, there are other people who collect UFO sightings. One of them is called BEAMS, B-E-A-M-S. I think that's run by a guy called Ken Parsons. And there are other, do you know of any others in the UK?
The UK UFO sightings website has a lot of reports in.
UK UFO sightings.
And again, I'm actually linked in with them in a way, in that if there's any Birmingham cases that go on there, they've allowed me to put a post on there asking for more information. Right. And a couple of the people who have posted threads on there have then got in touch with me.
Okay. And of course, there's the MUFON, Mutual UFO Network in the States, which is probably the biggest one worldwide, I would say.
Yeah, certainly.
But a lot of people seem to think that is a quasi or semi-government run thing, that it's been infiltrated to some degree.
Possible.
You think that's
possible, considering it's such a large-scale group and
Yeah.
has a big influence in the subject? Yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't put that out of the question.
Right. All right. So let's come on to a case in 1991, Bickerton Hills in Cheshire.
Yes, this is interesting. It's the same year that the other case from Blackmill.
Right.
Again, that one was in July '91. This one's in the winter of '91. So,
Right.
This is Bickerton Hills, and this is a couple that were out doing a night hike after dark in Bickerton Hills. It was 2:30 in the morning, so very, very dark, and a cold and frosty night. But they did this on occasion. They'd go out walking in the hills just for fun, really, just to have a walk around after dark. And they were approaching a farmer's field. Now, the witness can't remember the exact location. He has been looking for it on a map, and he said he'd get back in touch if he finds the exact place where this happened. But essentially, it was a farmer's field that was surrounded partially by hedgerows. And they were about 30 to 35 metres from the edge of the field. And all of a sudden, a white light came on in the middle of the field. It was he described it as a white glowing orb of light. It appeared to be about 7 feet up off the ground.
Right.
And it appeared to be doing circular motions very, very fast.
Right.
Spinning continuously.
Right.
Immediately, what came to his mind was that there was a person standing in the middle of the field holding a torch and spinning around in circles, yeah.
Right.
But after a couple of seconds, he realised that's just absolutely ridiculous. Why on earth would there be a person in the middle of the night standing in the field spinning around?
At 2:30 in the morning.
Yes, yeah, with nobody else around. Yeah.
Right.
Strange locals, maybe, who knows.
But there's no stranger than folk, I suppose.
So his girlfriend got quite spooked by this.
Right.
Because they couldn't explain it at all, and it was very odd, and the movements it was doing were very unusual, and there was nobody else around at all. And she actually went and hid. She went and hid behind a bush. She didn't want to go any closer. The guy, on the other hand, it had the opposite effect on him. He was quite intrigued to see what it was, and he continued to move closer to the field, occasionally calling back to his girlfriend, and she was trying to coax him to come back to her and not to get any nearer the thing.
Right.
As he got closer to the field, he suddenly felt full of energy. He said it was like his whole nervous system had been triggered all at once. He felt almost like electricity sort of flowing through him.
Right.
So
you think this was similar to the Jim Penniston hair standing on end electric field feeling, or do you think it was perhaps something else? Because it sounds something different to just an electric field.
Yes.
It felt like my whole nervous system had been triggered.
Yeah, he said it was more an internal feeling rather than static in the air.
Right. Okay.
So unlike the case from Nova Scotia and the Rensham case, of course,
and many other cases
yes,
where
absolutely,
electric fields are present.
Yes, certainly. It seemed more internal to him, and whether that was partially brought on by adrenaline through what was happening or not, he says it could have partially been that.
Right.
But he had a sudden desire to get closer to the object. He said this was an unnatural feeling. It wasn't a normal sort of just interest. It was a real push to get closer to it.
All right.
As he got nearer to the field, he realised that this object was actually traversing around the field like this. And it was clearly not anybody holding a torch. You could see the object, and it was also moving too fast for it to be that. He got quite close to the edge of the field, and all of a sudden the light just blinked out. It was gone.
Right.
And he was quite confused by that, and he continued to walk towards where he'd seen it. A few moments later, something else appears, this time a lot closer to him. He said, what he described, very, very odd. He said it looked like the back of a bumper car, almost. It was a sort of like a metallic beam structure of some kind, with a red light at each end. Right. And he said it was at a slight angle, and it popped up. It seemed to pop up out of the ground. Right. And it seemed to be about 5 or 6 foot wide, and it just popped up a few feet, and it was making a low humming sound as well. Okay. It sort of come up like this and then just dropped straight back down and was lost from view behind this mound of earth. It looked, to all intents, that this thing had come up out of the ground and then gone back down into the ground. It's possible it was observing him or something like that. Right. Now, he was going to go up to the place where this thing had appeared, and then in the distance he noticed a Land Rover coming. He could see the headlights of it, and it was coming in the direction of the field. And this unnerved him. He didn't know whether it was anything to do with what he'd seen, and it was a local farmer coming to see what the lights were, or what it was. But he decided to get out of there at that point and didn't hang around. So he went back to his girlfriend, and they left the area quite swiftly.
Okay.
affected him quite a lot. That did. It's given him a big interest in the subject. His girlfriend, on the other hand, she shut it out completely. Doesn't want anything to do with it. He's no longer with her, but I can't talk with her about it.
Well, let's just discuss, having discussed, you know, some of the better cases that have been reported, just a general, you know, what can we piece together? The first question is, which a lot of people ask, is how come none of these witnesses get good photographs? Can you answer that, Dave?
Yeah, well, to an extent I can. A lot of the time these objects are quite distant in the sky.
So would you contend then that the pilots, shall we say, of these craft have some way of knowing that there is human beings in the vicinity?
Yes, yeah, that has been seen in a number of cases. In fact, there's been some cases where where people have tried taking photographs and nothing's appeared on the camera, or they've broken the camera at the point when they're going to take the photograph.
Right.
It's very interesting. It does seem to suggest they've got direct interaction and can change things at will if necessary. I believe that most of the time these craft are seen accidentally by people, just being in the right or the wrong place at the right or wrong time. But occasionally they can appear for people on purpose, if they so wish. I don't believe that they're trying to make open contact with us at the moment, so I think that's probably the reason why.
So they have chosen to remain covert, and they have the technology to remain covert.
Yes,
which is,
they're sometimes seen accidentally, but if they're physical in our atmosphere, and sometimes have to be visible for whatever reason, then there is the possibility of being seen. But I find it interesting that a lot of the time these sightings take place in very remote areas, or in the middle of the night, so say 3 in the morning. And I don't think that's accidental at all. I think that's because they appear at those times because they know that there's going to be less people around, less witnesses that could possibly see them.
All right. Well, one fairly recent case that was caught on film was the Jerusalem sighting.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that, Dave?
Right. I don't know whether I buy that as a real incident. I think it's a very clever hoax. I've seen a lot of analysis of the footage online, and various issues with the 4 videos. For a start, the 4 videos have got slight differences between them in terms of the speed that the object ascends, how it looks on the camera, this sort of thing, the timing of the flash of light that comes from it.
Right.
I think it's probably a viral.
Meaning what do you mean?
A viral video. It's been put out onto the internet, claiming to be a real incident. The people responsible for it are probably never going to come forward and say they made it. It's just out there. It's interesting that it appeared short time before the new film Battle Los Angeles. Right. Some people think it might have been a viral for that movie to get people interested in UFOs. Right. So they get more people going to see the film. If any of the videos are real, that's a very impressive incident. It's possible that one of the 4 videos is the real deal, and the other 3 are fake. That's always a possibility.
Yeah, I mean that was one thing that I thought that or possibly that 3 of them are real, and that a 4th one, which is fake, has been put out to try and debunk the other 3. Maybe, you know, that maybe it was a real incident.
Yes,
it's just that they've deliberately faked some others. To discredit the first.
Yes,
so.
I've seen video reconstruction. Obviously, it's easy to reconstruct anything these days, and I have seen video reconstructions where they've added in extra lights of other colour to the thing that look just as realistic as what you're looking at on camera. So, but you always have to be wary these days with video and photographic evidence. I find other forms of evidence to be just as valid, if sometimes not even more valid. Witness testimony, radar.
Exactly. What really frustrated me about that incident was that it was on ITN, that's where I saw it first. Why doesn't someone from ITN go and find as many eyewitnesses as possible and then get testimony? That's what you need. Because let's say 60 people saw that, and you get a written statement.
Yes, totally.
It's harder to refute than a fake. You know, video evidence seems like it's better evidence, but actually it probably isn't as good as getting 60 eyewitness testimonies or something.
No, not at all, no. But I think that's probably one of the reasons why it might be a hoax. because there haven't been any other witnesses come forward to it.
Right.
And also, none of the people who took these 4 videos have come forward to sell their story to the paper. And that seems unlikely that none of them would be wanting to cash in on it.
Yeah. I hadn't considered that. That is a good point.
Yeah. I mean, say, for example, the Phoenix Lights incident, the famous incident over Phoenix in Arizona, there were lots and lots of witnesses to that. Lots of different people have come forward, both on and off camera, to say that they saw this object go over. Right. So I certainly believe that was a real incident, and that there was a massive craft of some kind over Phoenix.
Right. I mean, when are the hot spots in terms of dates? Are there any? I mean, winter or summer, or is it just
on a worldwide level? No, I wouldn't say there's any, except for in the early mid-40s to sort of mid-50s, there were a lot of sightings across America.
Right.
That seems to have been the focus initially.
Right.
That said, there was plenty of cases from the 40s in the UK and elsewhere in the world as well.
Right.
But it does seem to have sort of been focused around New Mexico and places like that in America. Of course, you've got the famous Roswell incident in '47.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of other sightings around that time, up to about the mid-50s. Many people, Timothy Good has looked into this in quite a lot of depth, and so has Nick Redfern, and they both believe that the military was aware of these from about the sort of mid-40s, and in the early days was trying to interact with the things and try to shoot them down a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm convinced that the military are aware of it all at some level. You know, I'm not talking about every person at some very high level. I think there's got to be a facility somewhere which they probably know as soon as one of them incurs into our airspace. I think that they're possibly, and maybe, there's a bogey, just keep an eye on it. Yeah, okay, it's gone,
Yes.
Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I believe there's numerous groups of individuals involved with this that are well aware of what's happening on a worldwide level. There's certainly groups within NASA, certain groups within NASA are well aware of what's happening. Also the CIA in America, the MOD across here, but
GCHQ, you think?
Yeah. But not most of them. Most of the groups, like our own government, for example, I don't believe that our Prime Minister has any more knowledge on the subject than the rest of us do, or the majority of the MPs. It's going to be kept to certain key groups within the military and within security agencies.
Right. Okay. We've discussed sightings today, and next week we're going to talk about contact experiences, and really to actually start to get to the bottom of what's going on with UFOs. I think the secret lies in contact experiences. Certainly, Would you go along with that, Dave?
Yeah,
I mean, would you care to give us a comment just to sort of set the scene for next week's show?
Yeah. Well, I think the contactees are certainly on the front line of this subject, because they're having direct interaction with the beings that are flying these objects around our skies.
Okay. And what do you say to a complete hardened skeptic who would just say, these people are either making it up, or they've seen a car headlight, or they've just seen some natural phenomenon? Well,
I'd say there's a lot of evidence to back up it being real experiences. You've got a lot of cases where the same things reported time and time again by people, not just by people interested in the UFO subject. Some people are just complete strangers to UFOs and what these beings are supposed to look like. You've also got physical aspects to it sometimes, such as body markings, alien implants, of course. And there are other things. There are other convincing bits of evidence in certain key cases. For example, the Travis Walton abduction experience.
Yes. So, but at the heart of the problem for people like you and I trying to get to the root, the truth of this is that the ETs themselves have a policy to remain covert.
Yes, certainly. Yeah.
That's.
Yeah, I believe that they've spoken to key individuals.
You believe there's been contact with?
Yeah, at certain points in our past.
And we'll talk about that next week. Okay, so it's fascinating talking to you, Dave, and really appreciate you coming along to Telford.
No problem. It's great to be here.
We are going to do another interview next week, as I say, about contact cases. So it just remains for me to say, keep your eyes on the skies, keep your feet on the ground, and tell all your friends about this show. Today I am in Telford again with Dave Hodrian, who is the chairman of the Birmingham UFO group. Welcome, Dave.
Great to be back.
And this week we are going to speak about ET or alleged ET contact experiences. Last week we spoke about UFO sightings, because on the RichPlanet.net website you can report either your UFO sighting or your contact experience. And we've had this contact set up for about a year now, and the contact reports go to Dave, and Dave goes through them with a fine-tooth comb, and some of them he writes up for his website, which is the Birmingham UFO
group. Yeah.
Birmingham UFO group. Could you just tell us about that website, Dave, and briefly about the Birmingham UFO group?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the website got launched the same time the group started in late 2007, and it's where I put all the case reports of the cases that I look into. The majority of cases, the witnesses usually happy with me writing up a detailed report of their experiences. 90% of the time fully confidential, so no personal details on there. So there's no risk of identification through these case reports going out. And they cover a mix of both UFO sightings and contact cases. I've been very interested in contact for a long time. I believe it's a very interesting angle on the UFO subject, and I've started to be known as one of the UK's sort of leading researchers into the contact field now. Right. And so far, I looked into about 60 or so contact cases, mostly from around UK.
Right. Now, the UFO subject is a controversial subject, and we spoke a little bit about this last week as to why there's not better evidence.
Yes.
And we shared the view that whoever is piloting these craft has an order to remain covert. Now that sounds a bit like a cop-out, but based on the evidence that I've seen over the years, I think that these craft they are being intelligently piloted by non-human intelligences, shall we say?
Yeah.
Now, and the UFO contact phenomenon, if we call it that, again, sometimes people struggle to get evidence which will convince, a skeptic. Now, we're going to discuss some cases which have been reported via RichPlanet.net that I've passed on to Dave, and some of them are rather disturbing, I have to say.
Yes.
As is often the case with contact experiences, not all contact experiences, and we will. At the end of the interview, we will go into some of the skeptical arguments which people try and explain things like this away with, just to give our opinion on that.
Yes.
So, as I said, we've got a few cases here that we're going to go into detail with, and these have all been reported to RichPlanet.net and Birmingham UFO Group in the last year, although they haven't all taken place in the last year. Most of them are historical cases. So the first case, Dave, is from a place called Shard End near Birmingham.
Yeah, it's part of Birmingham.
Part of Birmingham. So can you give us an overview of that case, Dave?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's a girl in her 20s, and she got in touch through your website. She up until earlier this year, back in January, she hadn't had any experiences which were definitely seemed to be ET or UFO related. She's never had any UFO sightings. Had a lot of other unusual experiences throughout her life, as often happens with contact cases. Right. But it was only on the 16th of January when her ET-related encounters began, shall we say.
So this is this year, 2011.
Yes.
So it's a very recent case, this one.
Yes.
Right.
And also her brother has also had contact experiences. I covered his case last year. And I didn't realise the two cases were related until I started speaking with her.
So you'd already investigated this girl's brother.
Yes.
Before she contacted RichPlanet.net, and you then put two and two together.
Yes.
And realised they were related. Okay, so can you give us the brief story of what she experienced?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the first main ET experience happened on I say ET. I don't necessarily. I'm not saying 100% that they're extraterrestrial. They could be extra-dimensional. They could be time travelers. Lots of different theories put down to what these beings are. I just call them ETs. Okay. Maybe aliens, essentially. So it was the evening of 16th of January 2011, and she went to bed at 10:30 p.m. It was a normal night. A boyfriend was over there, and she kept waking up in the night, and this was something she wouldn't usually do. She just kept waking up for seemingly no reason, and then just dropping back off to sleep. At some point in the early hours of the morning, she woke up, and as she rolled over, she came face to face with a what's known as a grey, a grey being. It was up on the bed, and it was staring right at her. She's done me a drawing of what the being looked like.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
Yeah, she only really saw its head
Right.
and neck and a bit of the shoulders. She says it had a kind of cylindrical shaped body, long arms, long thin arms as well. But she didn't really see those too clearly because she was quite transfixed with the being's eyes, which happens with a lot of cases. You get that time and time again reported.
And it's got the classic, just the little slit for mouth and nostrils, which is just reported over and over again.
Yes.
And the almond slanted black eyes, you know.
Yes,
and
quite small in this case. Yeah, the eyes were.
And the bulb-shaped head, you know, it's so common in so many cases. But
certainly,
carry on, Dave.
So rather than be terrified by this, she felt unusually calm looking at this being and very accepting of it, and she just rolled over and dropped back off to sleep. Right. And again, that's something that's reported time and time again with cases, not just with the beings, sometimes with the craft sightings as well, close encounters of UFOs. So people can feel strangely calm or like it's a normal everyday occurrence to them.
And you think this may be something that they are being, their minds are somehow being interfered with?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I believe it's something that the ETs are employing on purpose.
It's a microwave anesthetic or something, something along those lines.
So she rolled back and went back to sleep. A short while after that, she felt what felt like the end of a metal rod touch her on the side of a left temple. Felt cold and metallic. And then a moment after that, she felt down on her right thigh. She started to get itching. It's kind of like sort of throbbing sensation, and she scratched it. And then fell back off to sleep. And essentially, that was her experience through the night time. In the morning, she woke up and looked down at her thigh, and she saw it was a little red dot with a bruise close to it. That she was pretty sure wasn't there before, and that fitted in with the location where she'd felt the itching on her leg. I've actually got a photograph here that she took.
A photograph of that. Yeah.
She didn't take this on the day, but she took it soon afterwards, and we've got that as evidence essentially.
All right. Any other notable points in that case?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Later on, when we regressed her.
So you actually we'll just explain what that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know a hypnotherapist who can put people under a trance to try and unlock memories that they have no conscious memory of.
Yes.
So you regress this woman.
Yes.
To find out what she would say under hypnosis.
Absolutely, yeah. I've quite often that's a way of recovering additional memories about experiences and filling in gaps. And
just to interrupt you there, Dave, for people who are sceptical of this, because I know organisations such as B.U.F.O.G, they will not accept regression as any kind of evidence because they say it's unreliable, what have you. People who have been regressed and asked to remember things about their childhood will come out with all kinds of information that they cannot consciously remember, and then when they're taken out of trance, all of this stuff that's been written down, they go, crikey, now that you've put that in front of me, I remember it, but there's no way I could have recalled that.
Yes.
Vast details of people's childhood. So this, for me, this is proof that regression does work, and
certainly,
it does unlock memories, which makes you wonder what B.U.F.O.G is actually set up for. But just continue, Dave.
Yeah,
you've regressed this woman.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and when this was in early February, I took the hypnotherapist around her house when we regressed her back to this incident. I felt this was one of the incidents that she'd had that I thought would be good to go back and re-explore. Under regression, she remembered seeing the being actually holding a metal rod and touching on the side of the head, and there was behind it was glowing white light, which I find very interesting. There wasn't a massive amount of evidence to support this theory, but it's possible that she was not no longer in a bedroom at that point, that
Right.
she'd been abducted and was aboard a craft.
Right.
Quite often, the walls of the rooms aboard these craft do glow
Yeah.
bright white.
Yeah, we've had this reported in many cases
Yes.
where there seems to be a light source, but there's no light bulb. It seems to come
Yeah,
out
it's
of
a
the
general light
walls.
source coming
Yeah.
out the walls, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's possible. She also had a number of flashbacks after that point. Quite often when we regress somebody, because it brings it to the forefront of their mind again, they can sometimes later get flashbacks of additional details. And a couple of weeks after the regression, she contacted me and told me she'd had another couple of flashbacks. She again drew some drawings of them. And the first one she had was of another entity.
Okay. Take a look at this.
It was a different one to before. It was a grey again, but there were noticeable differences. First of all, it had wrinkles over all over its skin. It looked quite old. Had a sort of bluish grey coloured skin.
So this is a side view on the right.
Yes, she drew the side. She saw the side view first, and then it turned towards her,
Right.
and she saw it. And the other noticeable difference with this one is it had irises, which
Okay.
were kind of a paler. Most of its eye was black, but then had sort of paler irises in there as well,
Right.
which is interesting.
It's a very good drawing. Yeah.
Yeah, and the being was also opening its mouth, as you can see in the picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is interesting. They don't often do that.
Right.
It wasn't actually speaking to her then. She doesn't remember hearing any words coming out.
Right.
It was just opening its mouth at her. The second vision which she got back was of the being walking around her bedroom. She saw its full body, arms and legs, and walking around the side of her bed.
Right.
So it's possible that was that when she initially woke up, she'd seen that.
Right. Which again has been reported many times by many abductees. This grey beings in the bedroom. I mean, that's
Quite often the start of an abduction experience.
Yeah. Okay. And now, did she have any other experiences, Dave?
Yes, she contacted me again on the 21st of April to say that she'd had another visitation, or what she believed was another visitation by ETs on the night before. She'd woken up in the early hours of the morning and heard a noise that sounded like running water coming from around the doorway to her bedroom. It's very odd. She said it definitely wasn't the central heating, or it wasn't a tap left on in the bathroom or anything like that. She said she never heard anything like it before from that location. And she thought that was very, very odd. And then soon after that, she felt a presence in the room, which again is something that's reported time and time again with contact cases. So she couldn't see anything at that point, but she felt that there was something there in the room. This unnerved her quite a bit because obviously she knew about her previous experience. And she rolled over to cuddle up next to her boyfriend, looking over his head along his side of the bed. She saw two very strange entities. They looked almost the shape of greys, but they were wider, and it was like they were almost transparent, and they looked kind of like rippling water. It was like she could see through these things. There were just images, just shapes standing there by the side of the bed. There was one up by his head height and another one down by the knees, and they were standing there completely still. She watched them for about 10 seconds before she got too scared and closed her eyes. And she doesn't know what happened with them after that. They didn't seem to interact with her or her boyfriend. Shortly after that, she then noticed a low humming sound coming from outside of the house. So it's possible that there was a craft out there that was making this noise. So it sounded very, very odd. It didn't sound like a normal car engine running or anything like that, or a helicopter. It was just a strange kind of low humming sound. And that went on for quite a while. She thinks that went on for at least 10 minutes, anything up to half an hour. And she just lay there listening to this sound, not daring to open her eyes. After about this time, her son started to sort of make gurgling noises. Her young son sleeps in a cot in a different room. And started to make a few murmuring noises and drop back off.
And how old would the son be?
He's in his first year. So
so just a baby. Okay.
Yeah, 1 or 2 years old. Yeah.
All right. And then he actually he spoke to his mother, didn't he?
Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, he must have been at least one. He was probably,
he was sort of learning to talk.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. The following morning, he actually just said the word man, and she turned to him and she quizzed him, what man? And he pointed towards the window of his room, and he said window, and she couldn't get anything more out of him. But she thinks it's possible that he was also visited.
Okay, Now, before we continue with Dave Hodrian's UFO files, if you are interested in the UFO subject, which everybody should be, then the place to go is the Leeds 2011 Exopolitics Conference. Now that takes place at Leeds University on the 5th, 6th and 7th of August, where myself and many others will be speaking, some of whom have been on this show. RichPlanet.net is sponsoring the conference, so why not make a weekend of it and get yourself along. Now, before we go to the break, it's time for this week's light-hearted interlude with The Poet in the Pub. Now, most of The Poet in the Pub's material is not broadcastable on television, and you can find details about his DVD on the RichPlanet.net website. So take it away, Poet in the Pub.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. The dentist said, now open wide. I want to see the other side. Lift your nose if you want to breathe. But his breath smelt like cack, and even though I was lying back, I started throwing up on his sleeve. He had supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. His mouth much closer to his arse than his nose is. Rotting beef on unbrushed teeth, a noxious odour underneath. I could not stand the noxious hum of garlic-tinged effluvium. Now just relax, the masseuse said, and drew up close to rub my head. After this, your migraines will be through. But stomach problems let her down, and even worse than made me frown, her breath instead just made me want to spew. She had supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Her mouth much closer to her arse than her nose is. Rotting beef on unbrushed teeth, a noxious odour underneath. I could not stand the noxious hum of garlic-tinged effluvium. A noble chap he was, Jethro, the landlord's dog, I loved him so. He'd come to me and offer up his paw. One night he licked me on the lips, I showered him with my chips. I've never really fancied a Labrador. He had supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. His mouth much closer to his arse than his nose is. Rotting beef on unbrushed teeth, a noxious odour underneath. I could not stand the noxious hum of garlic-tinged effluvium. God damn, that's an instant classic. I think that's a one-take wonder.
Welcome back on board the Starship. I'm talking with Dave Hodrian of Birmingham UFO Group, and he specialises in UFO or ET contact cases, which we're discussing. Now, we were just discussing a young lady who has a young baby, and we just showed some images that she has produced of this being that she claims that, came into her room.
Yes.
Now, she also, in her childhood, produced some rather interesting drawings, which luckily she still had in her possession. So tell us, first of all, how did you find out about these drawings?
Right, well, when I first went round to see her and started talking to her about her experiences, I actually visited her twice. I visited her just to hear her experiences, and then I returned later with the hypnotherapist to regress her. The first time I went round to speak with her, she remembered doing some drawings from way back when she was about 12 years old.
Right.
That she thinks were related in some way to the being that she'd seen. But she couldn't really remember too well, but she was sure it was something to do with that. Now, she wondered whether she still had these, and I said, it'd be great if you could get hold of them. Mm-hmm. So she went and asked her father, and I managed to track down the drawings. And when I went round there the second time with the hypnotherapist, she showed me the drawings. She had them there, the originals. And it was a stack of A4 papers. And it was absolutely fascinating. The front cover said top secret across it and evidence, and it had her and her brother's names and her address on and this sort of thing. And it also strangely had the word lotus written on it, but it wasn't. It was LOTUS with dots after each letter.
Right.
So obviously stood for something.
Right, but she doesn't recall what that meant.
No, she doesn't recall.
But she thinks it stood for something, lotus.
Well, yeah, it designated it stood for something by the dots after each letter, so that's 5 words with the initials LOTUS, yeah.
Right.
But she's unsure whether she just made that up off the top of her head.
Right.
Or whether it actually meant something. So I turned the page and I was greeted by a picture of a grey.
Right.
Straight up, very large black eyes, larger black eyes than the being she'd seen in a room in January.
Right. And we can take a look at that, can we?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. I've got here some of the drawings.
Right. Now,
from
is
this
it
series.
possible that she, I mean, how long ago would this have been when she was 12? Are you talking about 10 years ago or more? Or?
Yeah, but 12 years ago.
12 years ago.
13 years ago.
I mean, you know, your skeptic would say, oh, well, she's obviously seen some film or something, you know, that's where she's got that from. What would you, I mean, did you ask her about that? Or how, you know,
I did,
whether she'd seen any science fiction or anything like that?
She said that back then she didn't really have that much of an interest. And even today she doesn't have that much of an interest. She knows that her brother has had experiences.
Yes.
And now seemingly she has.
Yes.
She had a bit of an interest in the UFO subject.
Yes.
But has steered clear from the contact angle for some reason.
Right.
She doesn't really know why. It just has never really interested her that much at all. Right. It's possible that she could have seen drawings. I mean, you know, you could say that about anybody.
Now you said there was a stack of drawings.
Yes.
We've got well 2 sheets here, each with 4 figures on it.
Yes.
There was more than this, then. Dear,
well, those are the main drawings, and then there were other ones on. There were other things she'd done on the backs.
Right.
Okay, essentially the front of the sheets, it was a grey slowly turning into a human. So the face slowly changes through the series of drawings.
Right.
Very, very interesting. Ends up at a human face. It's not her face. It's somebody else.
And it's fascinating how she's drawn one of them in like almost looks like first angle projection.
Yes.
Which is quite impressive for a 12-year-old. She's done an exact like perfect side view, front view. And these are quite well constructed drawings for someone age 12, certainly. I would say.
And she doesn't know why she did that. She doesn't know why she drew them on the side. She barely remembers doing the drawings. I mean, she knows she did them, but she doesn't remember why or anything.
So we've got one without a mouth in the top left.
Yep.
Then the next one we seem to have pupils and a mouth. And then on the next one we've got more human-looking eyes, but still with a slightly odd-shaped head. And then the last 2 are almost, you know, look pretty much human. So it's a grey alien turning into a human. And
on the backs of these sheets, she'd actually written a percentage. She actually on the first one, it said 0% human.
Right.
Next one, 10-15% human, and it just went right up. The last one is not 100%. The last one she'd written on the back of that 90% human.
Oh right, the one that looks like a human. She said 90% human.
Yeah.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, very, very odd. And also on a couple of them, she'd drawn an open mouth. Right. Which is interesting. It was the being's. It was the mouth. How it would look like if it was open. Right. Which is very interesting because it links back to the wrinkled being that she saw in April. So not in April, in January of this year.
Right. Did you ask her if she could remember doing these drawings, and B, why she drew them?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and she had no recollection of why she'd drawn them. Right. So we decided that would be good to again cover in the regression. So when we regressed her, we took her back to that, and she remembers drawing them, but again she gave us no real clue as to why she'd drawn them. Okay. She didn't know even under hypnosis. All right. And nor did she know the what lotus stood for. She just said it was a random word. And this isn't something you've managed to find anything that it means? No, not at all. I'd look around online and I couldn't find anything that would fit into. Right. So if there are any viewers out there who know what LOTUS might stand for pertaining to a contactee case, then get in touch. And any other interesting points in that case, Dave? I mean, yeah, I mean, she's had other experiences through for a large part of her life, which may or may not be ET related. I mean, if we can just touch on the drawing. Yeah. I mean,
once you study other contact cases, many contactees, or abductees, report seeing hybrid beings. Sometimes, or hybrid fetuses even, in tanks and this kind of thing. Do you think that that could indicate that she has seen or been part of a hybrid program?
Almost certainly, yeah. I think that alludes to that she's had previous experiences that she can't currently remember consciously. It's quite difficult to go back to those experiences, because usually you need a point to go back to, an experience to take her back to.
All right. Well, we will come on to the possible reason for a hybridization program towards the end of the interview. And you know, a lot of abductees, contactees, they do report seeing a light before they then get some sort of missing time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it lights up their whole bedroom. They're not always taken from their room, of course. A lot of people are taken from moving vehicles and other places while outside.
Yes.
So, but I'd say that there's more cases that take place from a person's bedroom than not.
Right.
And that's probably because they're aware that that's where they're most
yeah,
vulnerable.
that's an interesting thing to touch on. You mentioned vehicles.
Yes.
I have heard many cases of people being taken from a vehicle. And then probably the most common is from a bedroom.
Yes.
I mean, can you shed any light on that, Dave? I mean, is it because when you're in these situations, that's because what I've heard is that in order to take you, you've got to be in a certain fairly relaxed frame of mind in order so that they can subdue your brain using their technology to get you in that state to then take you. So if you're playing football, for example, it's maybe, you know, your brain's in a different state. It's probably difficult to take someone.
Yes.
I mean, would you go along with that?
That's quite an interesting theory. I mean, I haven't looked into that particular theory myself. Right. I believe that they certainly take people from remote areas, like people that are taken from their vehicles, usually find the cars alone on the road. They're in quite a remote location.
Right.
And I believe that, again, that's the same as them taking them from their room in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
They know that there's not going to be other people around to witness the craft. And also the person's going to be sort of more open to being taken.
And generally what's reported, or what's possibly the case, is that the person's partner is somehow knocked out before they are then...
I've had that of cases as well. Sometimes they'll find that they can't move at all, so they can't tell whether their partner in this state. But in certain cases, they found that they can move, and what they'll do is they'll might try to wake them up, and no matter how hard they shake them, they won't wake up.
Right.
It's like they've been switched off. Right. And it's possible that there were other people outside that were also switched off. I've had that in cases as well.
I interviewed a chap called Charles Hall, who's an alleged contactee.
Yes.
You know, he was in the military, and he uses the term that they electronically hypnotise you, and he believes that they use it's like a white rod that they point at your temple. Yeah. You know, when you're in a relaxed state, and they can just electronically hypnotise you using microwaves. That was his explanation. Yeah. Now we're going to talk about a case, very disturbing case, from Sheffield, and lady, she didn't contact me initially via the RichPlanet contact form. She contacted me via telephone, so I spoke to her for probably about 3/4 of an hour. She was fairly distressed, but described experiences going back to 1981, and the information that she gave me, she didn't actually say I'm an abductee, I'm a contactee. She just described several different things that had happened in her life, and she couldn't explain them. And just from my knowledge of contactees and abductees, I thought, well, she's a real good candidate to be an abductee, even though she didn't actually know it. She wasn't suggesting that to me when she phoned me. So I put her in touch with Dave. She's then contacted you. Yes. And take it from there, Dave.
Yeah. Well, I went over her experiences with her via email and phone at first, but she'd had so many experiences. I figured it'd be better to speak with her face to face. So I travelled up to Sheffield to meet with her directly, and I also took along the hypnotherapist with me again. We decided to do it all in the one day, so we go through her experiences and then also do a regression on some of those experiences. Right. Her first experience really for her was September 1981.
So this would be just as she was coming into adulthood?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
and she was living in Sunderland. And what happened was she'd been around her mum's house redecorating. Her mum and sisters lived in the area as well, but different house, and she lived on her own. And she got dropped home by her younger sister.
All right, I thought she was in her mid-teens. She was older than that then, in 81. All
Yeah,
right, okay.
yeah.
So she was
in her 20s, yeah.
in her early 20s,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. Okay.
And she went to bed as normal. It was just completely normal evening, just fell asleep. And in the middle of the night, she had what she believed at the time was a very vivid dream. Seemed to her more real than a dream would usually be. And in this dream, she was clothed. She was in a normal daytime clothes, and she was down a local park near to her house. And all of a sudden, the sky lit up bright white. It was almost like it was daylight. It was also raining as well, so her clothes were getting wet. And she became very frightened of this bright white light above. And that was essentially all she could remember.
Right.
And in the morning, she woke up and she immediately thought back to the dream and thought that's a very strange thing to have, a very odd nightmare. When she went to look at the base of her bed, she went to get dressed, and rather than her clothes being neatly folded, they were lying in a crumpled heap. And when she picked them up, she was amazed to see that they were soaking wet.
Right. And she would normally fold her clothes.
Yeah, she was very neat and usually fold them neatly at the base of the bed. So it was obvious to her that she'd been out in the middle of the night in her clothes.
Right.
But she didn't remember it. But it fitted back with the strange dream she'd had about being down the park and it raining and her getting wet. But that was essentially all she knew about that.
Okay. So you then went up and regressed it, and you got more information about that episode.
Yeah, a lot more.
So what came out under the regression?
Yeah, her regression went very, very well. Sometimes with regressions, they can get sort of very fragmented memories back. It went very well with her, and she had a clear recollection of what had taken place. And it essentially fills in all the gaps. What happened was some beings that appeared in her room. She couldn't see, when I asked for a description of these beings, she said that they were just in shadow. They were shadowed beings, so we did try to get the details of the facial features on that, but she couldn't give us too much detail on that. It was possible that they were hiding their appearance from her on purpose, but also it was in the middle of the night, so it would have been quite dark in her room, of course. And they wanted her to go with them. They wouldn't say where, they just said they wanted her to go with them. And she was upset about being in her night clothes, so she wanted to go with them. She said, will you allow me to get dressed?
Right.
And they allowed her to get dressed. She was quite frightened of the beings, and she decided to run away from them. And she actually ran downstairs, ran out of her house, and ran off down a road.
And she recalls all this under regression.
Yeah, this is what she recalled completely. And at that point, when she left the house, it wasn't actually raining at that point. Now, she doesn't know why she didn't go knock on her neighbour's door, you know. I mean, the situation, maybe some people would, maybe some people wouldn't. She just wanted to get away from these strange beings. So she ran down to a local park, and at that point it started to rain, so she was getting wet. She looked around, couldn't see the beings anywhere. It was still very dark, as clearly the middle of the night, though she didn't know what time it was. And then all of a sudden, bright white light above. Next thing she knows, she's no longer in the park. She's aboard a... She finds herself in a white-walled room, so the walls were glowing white. It was essentially an oval-shaped room. Across in one area, across near one of the walls, there was a bunch of other people, and they were crouching down, huddled together, and they looked very frightened of something. She didn't try to speak with them, because
possibly other abductees.
Yeah. The suggestion is that there were other people that had been picked up elsewhere. At this point, a sliding door opened in the wall, and a Nordic being approached her. These are the ones that look extremely human-like, which I find very fascinating. That aspect, the fact that they look just like humans. Yeah. Obviously, the implications of that are quite great, and we can go into those in a bit if you wish.
Yes.
But he approached her, and she asked him what was going on. She could still fully move here, so she wasn't paralysed in any way. And the being said to her, he said, "It's not your time. You're not needed yet." And she tried to get from him I say him. He looked male. and he said, it's not your time, and he wouldn't explain to her what he meant by that. And then she was unceremoniously put back down in the park. She doesn't remember her travel, which is you get that in a lot of experiences. It's called travel amnesia. The consultee will often forget the actual moving between place to place. Sometimes they'll remember being floated up into the craft, other times not. She could not remember that. She just suddenly found herself back in the park again. Light went off, and then she assumes that she walked back home. Now that part of the experience, she doesn't remember that. She couldn't give us details about walking back home. She just said it was heavily raining, and that's all she remembered from it essentially, before waking up. So we can only assume she re-entered her house, dumped the clothes down at the base of the bed, got back into bed, and dropped back off to sleep. So absolutely fascinating.
Now, we will come on to what he may have meant by "it's not your time yet." We'll come on to that. But there was, shortly after this, there was another experience that we'll take a look at after this short break. Welcome back on board the Starship. I'm talking with Dave Hodrian, who is the chairman of Birmingham UFO Group, and he's an expert in contactee and abductee cases. Now, there was, shortly after this, there was another experience. Tell us about that, Dave.
Yeah, this
is still in 1981.
Yeah, this is her mum and her sisters. This is the following. This happened on the same evening. It's absolutely fascinating. It seems that her mum and sisters were also taken in a completely separate incident on the same night that she had this incident.
And how far away did they live? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Same area.
Same area.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So
she hasn't given me specific address details because of the confidentiality agreement.
And they were in the car.
Yeah. Later in the day, she found out the following day after her younger sister had dropped her off at home on the evening before. She'd then driven back to her mum's, and on the way back, she'd seen round behind the housing estate where they lived an orange glow coming in the sky, and she looked around. She could see the sun, so she knew it wasn't the setting sun. I mean, it was dusk time, but it wasn't the setting sun that was making this light. So she got home. She went in and got her mum and her other sister and said, "Look, we've got to go around and have a look at this and see what this is." So they all got in the car and drove around the back of the estate, and they were amazed to come face to face with a bright, glowing orange sphere of light. That was it was low down. It wasn't at ground level. It was up in the sky. She doesn't know the exact height. As they approached the object and got closer to it, all of a sudden the car cut out, the engine went off, and the lights stopped. And this has been reported in many close encounter experiences. Yes. Probably the field around the object interferes with electrical devices in the area. So they didn't mind that the car cut out because they were there to see the object and they could see it. So it didn't bother them at first. And they stared at it, and it just remained there motionless. They stared at it for what seemed like to them 5 minutes. Then all of a sudden, the elder sister suddenly became very, very agitated and started to panic and said, "We've got to get out of here right now, I don't like this." They try starting the car. Initially, it won't start. Then suddenly the mother notices it's suddenly become dark, and she quizzes why it's become dark so suddenly. But that's all they knew. A moment later, the car starts up, and they realise this orange sphere is no longer there in the sky. The car starts up, and they head back home. When they arrive back home, they find that a whole hour had gone by. So essentially, there was 55 minutes that they couldn't account for. They knew that the journey to where they'd seen it was only 5 minutes, and to them, they'd only been looking at it for at most 5 minutes. So 3/4 of the time they'd been out. They couldn't account for that, which disturbed them. And they told their sister this when she went round to visit them, and she put 2 and 2 together and believed that something had happened to them on the same night they happened to herself. So.
And this is another aspect of the abduction phenomenon, that it runs in families.
Yes.
You know, brothers, sisters, mothers. Often, you know, they have the same experiences, which is consistent with a genetics program.
Yep.
That if they have made an adjustment to somebody, then that person's child has an adjustment, and through several generations they're possibly getting nearer to whatever it is they are doing, which we can discuss later. It appears that there's multiple members of this family have possibly been taken on the same night. This
Yes.
Nordic being says, well, you're not ready yet. All right, and Dave, so where does the case go from here?
Yes. Okay. So now we move forward to November 1983.
2 years on.
A couple of years
yeah,
on.
Yeah, okay.
And she was now living in Dagenham. And what happened is she was living with a partner there at the house, and she was very ill at that time, and she was lying in bed for most of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But in the evening, she wanted to go downstairs. She wanted to watch Top of the Pops was on TV, and she wanted to see that, and kicked off at 8 o'clock. So she'd asked her partner to wake her up when it was time for that. So he called up at 7:55, just shortly before, told her the program was about to start. So she got out of bed and got her clothes on. At that point, she saw a red glow coming from outside the bedroom window, out over a back garden. And she went to have a look and pulled back the curtains. And there, over the back garden, was a red glowing sphere of light. It was essentially level with with her window,
Right.
and appeared to be quite close. That was all she remembered from that. What happened next was, all of a sudden, it seemed like the sphere was no longer there, and then she headed downstairs to catch up with the program.
Okay.
And when she entered the room, her partner said to her, "Where have you been all this time?" And she looked on the TV and saw the credits for the program, but they weren't the starting credits; they were the end credits. She'd missed the program. She'd been gone a whole hour, and she couldn't account for that time at all. Very, very confusing to both her and her partner.
Right.
So all she had to go on was that she'd seen this red spherical object over the back garden of the house, and there was now missing time. So again, I thought this would be a very good experience to go back to,
And regress.
and regress her to see if anything else occurred during that time.
So did anything come out under regression?
Yeah, just like the first experience, she gave a very clear recollection of what took place during that hour. First thing was a grey being appeared in her bedroom. It had a bluey green coloured skin, and a very odd shaped head. She's actually done a drawing of it here that you can have a look at.
Right.
Now this being, she was actually laughing at it, which I find fascinating. She wasn't frightened by it.
Right.
She was actually laughing at the oddness of the shape of its head,
Right.
and how small its body was, how out of proportion its head looked.
Right.
And she actually nicknamed it Mr. Potato Head. Under the regression, she called it
Right.
Mr. Potato Head.
Right. I mean, comments like that don't help. There's just ammunition to the skeptics. Would you agree? Kind of. I mean, I guess.
No, not really.
You don't think so?
No, I think that her calling it that gives it a very human angle to that experience, and it was her looking at it,
Yeah.
and being amused by how odd it looked, and associating it with Mr. Potato Head because of the.
There is a character called Mr. Potato
Oh
Head.
yeah.
Oh right, okay.
It's a potato you put eyes and mouth and arms and legs onto, yeah.
Right.
So she associates
I've
it.
had a sheltered life.
She associated it with that toy. You see.
Yes. Yeah, it's a toy. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So then what happened?
Right, okay. Then she gave a detailed recollection of actually being floated up into the air and through the wall and window of her house and towards the sphere.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating. I have had it in one other case, the same thing reported, but it's always fascinating to me actually hearing it from them. She said that as she passed through the wall and window, she said it felt like treacle to her as she went through it.
And again, something many abductees have reported that they're taken straight through the window and they get an odd butterfly, slightly uncomfortable feeling in their stomach as they go through it. So we can hazard from that they've got some way of changing the molecular matter of beings.
Yeah, it shows it shows very advanced technology that they're using, and there's very odd aspects to the contact phenomena.
Okay, so she's taken up to a craft.
Yes, so she floated towards this red sphere. She described actually going through the air, feeling the cold of the nice air outside, and actually entering the red sphere, and inside there, it was a rectangular shaped room. She just found herself in the middle of it, and she landed and everything, and then she could move again.
Right.
And there was a sliding door in one end of the room, and behind her a chair, like low chair looking object. And there was two beings there. There was the grey that she'd seen in the bedroom, and there was also a reptilian being. And this is the first time apparently the first time that she'd seen this being. She described a tall, it had a greenish coloured, scaly like skin, red eyes, sort of bulbous snout-like face. Sort of very muscular, especially around the top of the legs and the tops of the arms. And it had sort of claws on the end of its end of its hands. Reptilians reported many times with experiences, not quite as much as greys and Nordics, but still reported in a good number of cases. It's my belief that these species are working together for a common aim. They were standing next to her, and she was actually angry at the beings for taking her aboard the craft. She was saying to them, "Why have you taken me? I want to watch my program. Put me back home."
Right.
So again, this reaction is very odd. A lot of contactees are usually quite frightened of these beings because they seem unusual to them, and it does tend to suggest that she might have possibly had previous experiences and actually recognised them. We did ask her that, and she said, that she didn't know whether she recognised them. There wasn't any previous experiences that we could get out of her at this point. But the association's there. So she was angry at these beings, and she actually tried to hit out at the reptilian, and it put its hand up, and it sort of blocked her somehow from touching it.
Right.
It kind of stopped her from moving,
Right.
which was very interesting. And then the reptilian told her something. It told her that she was going to be pregnant by the end of the experience.
Right.
And she asked the reptilian how, and he pointed at the chair.
Right.
And he said, "We're going to do a procedure, and after that procedure, you're going to be pregnant." And he got her to lay down in the chair. We didn't get a clear recollection here how she got into the chair.
Right.
She's not sure whether she was forced down into this chair. She seemed quite accepting of this again. Most people under such a scenario wouldn't be accepting of that, obviously. But what the reptilian did, it brought out this instrument. It was like a long needle, and it put the needle down into a belly button with her in a lying back seated position, and then it told her, "Now you're going to be pregnant." It also told her the date that her son would be born on. She told her she was going to have a baby boy, and he was going to be born on a particular date.
Right. Which it was.
Yeah. After the experience, she didn't remember being aboard the craft or having this procedure happen, but she knew somehow that that her baby was going to be born on this particular date. And at the time, she put it down to premonition of type, a psychic type thing. But obviously, under regression, we find out that the being had told her this directly, and that's why afterwards she thought that she knew the date. And it was very odd because her son was set to be born sort of late August, but they had to bring back the date. So, and then she went to be induced, and the induction didn't work for 3 days, which was very odd. And when it finally was, it was on the date that she knew it was going to be.
That particular Sheffield case that we've just discussed, Dave, we've just said there that off camera that case you could probably do a whole show on.
Yeah, certainly.
You could probably make a whole film on it. So
she's had a lot more experiences on top of the ones that I've just gone into. Yeah.
Okay, so if we just come on to the reason, have you come to any conclusions as to the purpose behind both the UFO and the abduction stroke contact phenomenon?
Yeah, well, I think that they're definitely interested in our genetics over numerous generations. It's my belief that it's an ongoing experiment of some kind. Either they've discovered us a long time ago, or are even involved with our own evolution here on the planet. And that's why they're taking a back step. That's why they don't feel the need to make open contact with us.
Yes.
Because they're studying us and seeing how we progress over the generations. Yeah.
So, I mean, I would. My own feeling on it is that it is a genetics program,
yes,
as opposed to a genetics experiment. In
yes.
other words, I think they're heading towards a goal because there's too many. I mean, hundreds of thousands, if you believe some people, cases going back too many years and several generations. And obviously, if they're making hybrids,
Yes.
I mean, do you think that's the objective?
Yes.
To make, we're not talking about half alien, half human.
Yes.
We're talking about minor changes or adjustments to
Yes.
some humans.
Yes. I think that that's definitely one of their agendas here. And it appears to be an agenda shared between numerous species, because you get the Greys involved, the Nordics, the reptilians.
So let's just say that they're introducing an adjustment to the human race.
Yeah.
There's 6.5 billion of us. They can't possibly put these adjustments into all of us, although the number is alleged to be very high, higher than people realise.
Yes.
So do you think that they could successfully introduce a genetic, like human Mark II or whatever change they put in, through this program?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it might not necessarily be through the normal means that we look at it, as in a genes being passed on through generations. It could spread out via that across the human race, but that would take a long time. But then again, perhaps for these beings, time is not really an issue.
Right. I mean, there is a theory that once we started setting off nuclear weapons in the late 30s,
Yes.
that they went, ooh, hang on, they've got to a stage where they're now disrupting the environment far
Yes.
too much with these weapons that they've managed to develop. It's time for another modification. Would you go along with that?
Yeah,
or?
yeah, I would. Yeah, to an extent. Yeah, they do seem very interested in our
technology,
protection of our own planet. Yeah.
Yes.
Either the destruction of either ourselves or of the Earth. They quite often show contactees aboard the craft images, sort of either directly visions in the head or sometimes even on screens, that seem to show sort of future disasters, sort of burning fires, Earth exploding, this sort of thing. Now, whether that's a future prediction of what might happen or whether it is a real thing that is actually going to happen, it's hard to say.
And a lot of contactees, abductees become very ecologically aware.
Yes.
And probably less materialistic.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Absolutely,
this is something which is common, which could have been given to them.
Yeah.
Which I guess is a good thing, really. Of course, it is a good thing. But what about the people who? There's the other theory that the hybrids that they're making are being taken somewhere else.
Yes, yeah, that's actually been told to a number of contactees during their experiences. They've actually spoken with the Greys and they've told them that they're going to populate another planet with these hybrid beings, and that's what they're for. Some people are very, very worried about the hybrid program, obviously for obvious reasons, and feel that there's negative implications that they're going to do something like suddenly replace our race with this hybrid race and destroy us. I haven't seen much evidence to support that theory. So I don't tend to go along with that. They seem to be quite. It seems to be for our benefit, as well as their own. Yeah. They seem to be improving us on an evolutionary level, I believe.
Right. I mean, I'm not sure I would agree with that. I think they're just making an adjustment, which is for a particular reason.
Yes.
I wouldn't say it's good or bad, or for our benefit.
Yes.
I think it's just, hey, they've got the capacity to destroy the planet, let's do something about it. You could view that as two ways. You could say, oh, they're dumbing us down, or they're making us like wimps, or you could say, hey, they're making us more peaceful. Do you know what I mean? It's too black and white.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's possible that they are not interested in us at all and just want to protect the planet.
Yeah,
for their own,
I would go along with that.
For their own use.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, for resources.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big emotional issue for a lot of people. Are they malevolent or benevolent?
Yes.
You know.
But I haven't seen much hostility from them. I mean,
other than shoving up things up people's bottoms and making them pregnant. Yeah.
But I think that that's kind of how we would experiment on a lab bunny or something in a lab, and that's possibly how it's seemed through ours.
Any comments on what you think the future holds?
Well, I'd like to hope for disclosure, as many people would. Whether that will come in our lifetime, who can say?
Right.
I can't set any date on that. It's being I believe that there's an ongoing cover-up, and that certain individuals around this planet know full well the reality of this.
And it's a cover-up because here I'll make a controversial statement. The UFO phenomenon is the abduction phenomenon. That's what UFOs are for and what they're being used for.
Yes.
And our certain echelons of certain military know exactly what's going on, and they cover it up. because it's something which basically perhaps the ETs themselves have said or have communicated somehow that it should be covered up, and in our military, for our own benefit, I guess, comply.
And of course, that's not just a spurious statement there that we're just randomly coming out with. There's a lot of very good evidence to back this up. Government documents that have been released that show that they've had an interest in the UFO subject right back to the 40s. You've got high-level witnesses coming out and saying that this is the case, that certain groups know full well about the reality of this.
Sure. I said for our benefit. Having said that, I believe they should disclose. I'm not saying that they do.
It would be good, but it would at the same time have world-changing implications.
Everyone would have to wake up and open their eyes and see an aspect of reality which they're completely unaware of at the moment. So it would change. It would certainly be major changes around the planet in many different levels. Okay. All right then, Dave. Thanks for a fascinating discussion, and thanks for all of your hard work in investigating these cases, because I know that you're one of the most enthusiastic and thorough researchers that I've ever met, and it's a real pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so it just remains for me to say, keep your eyes on the skies, keep your feet on the ground, and tell all your friends about this show.
16. Right. And the first one I went to was the UFO magazine conference, which was being held in Solihull, where I live. So that was very suitable. Mm-hmm. And I've been to them pretty much yearly ever since. Right. And it's just kind of gone on from there. Right.
So how old are you now, Dave?
I'm 33 at the moment.
Right. Okay. So it goes right back to your childhood, the interest.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. And you're the chairman.
Yes.
So you tell me about your wedding at the Black Mailbox and visit to UFO Congress.
Yes, this is in February 2010. Right. We decided, myself and my wife decided that rather than have a normal white wedding across here, right, we would take a trip across America, okay, go visit Las Vegas, and also go to the UFO Congress in Laughlin, which is about 80 miles away. It's something I've always wanted to visit. It's the one of the world's biggest UFO conferences, a week-long event. Right. So it seems suitable that we go across there. Right. And as it was near Nevada, of course, we decided to also go out to visit the base. And we decided we would get married next to the Black Mailbox, just on the outskirts of Area 51.
Right. And how did your wife feel about that?
She's the one who came up with the idea.
Oh, really?
A lot of people say that, yeah. I was talking about having a pretty much normal wedding, yeah, and she rang me up and said, no, I found this thing online, right, where a company will come and pick us up from the hotel, drive us out to the base, show us both the gates, we'll go visit the little alien, yeah, oh, yeah, the famous motel, yeah, yes. And also get us married at the Black Mailbox.
Good.
Took a few hours to come around to the idea, but right, yeah, absolutely hooked on it then, and no stopping us.
Right. So you had a good time then?
It was superb, absolutely right, wonderful week, yeah.
Okay. Out of the 100 or so cases that we've had reported so far, and anyone who wishes to report a case to RichPlanet.net, just click on the submit a sighting or experience link, and you can send your report, and I'll get a copy, and Dave gets a copy. As I say, out of the 100 or so reports that we've had, we've picked out some of the best.
Yes.
And many of these are multiple witness cases. You know, there's more than one witness that Dave's been able to check up on. And the other thing that amazes me is the time spread of these cases that have been reported, because they're not just recent. Some of them go back to the 1940s. And there's some in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Just about every decade has got a spread of UFO cases. So people are reporting cases that has stuck in their mind from 30, 40 years ago. In
absolutely.
Some cases, which is, in fact, I would say that the majority of the cases are historical in some way, rather than just recent.
To head out into the back garden to try out this thing, and she ended up at the sky, clear stars and moon fully visible, and she flashed it a couple of times. And at first there wasn't anything occurred, but after a short amount of time, she suddenly heard a noise coming from off to her right, from in the direction of the next door neighbours. Sounded like somebody whirring a cord around very, very fast in circles, sort of a kind of whirring, pulsing type of noise. she turned around to see what it was and was absolutely astounded by what she saw. There over the neighbour's garden, hovering about 100 feet in the air, was a large black boomerang-shaped object. It had 5 green lights on the base of the object, right along both parts of it.
The apex of the boomerang,
yes.
and along the, well, you call them wings.
Yes, separated out underneath. Okay. It had curved, smooth surface and was jet black in colour. It's blocking out the stars. It was about 50 foot in diameter.
Right.
Obviously, the size of this thing, she was absolutely shocked. She believed that it was directly related to her clicking the laser pointer, which you'd have to assume was probably the case. Right. It's interesting that the colour of the lights underneath were green, I find, because the colour of the laser pointer was also green. And does that designate that it changed the lights to that colour to indicate that? Possibly, possibly not. Yeah, I've got a drawing of what she saw. There it is.
And she was so freaked out by this, she couldn't get back to sleep. She told her husband about it, who wasn't really that interested. So, no. she pursued it, and she rang a friend at the early hours in the morning.
Yes, yeah, she has a night shift, and she decided to ring her friend in the early hours of the morning to tell him what she'd just seen, because she was quite hysterical, and obviously, as most people would be, she didn't want to go back to bed. She did see the object start to move away from the area. She watched it for a short period of time, about 10 seconds, and it started to turn on a diagonal. On a flat, and
so it sort of slowly turned through 45 degrees like this.
No, not like that, like that.
Oh, so it turned
yes.
in that plane.
So it changed direction. Yeah.
It changed direction.
Yes, like it was going to head away, but it didn't turn towards her. It seemed to turn away from her.
All right.
At this point, she became absolutely terrified and ran back inside the house.
Right.
She has no idea of how long the craft remained in the area for.
Right.
If that's what it was, I call it craft. It seems to be. It seems to be a craft of some kind.
Right, and you verified recent ones.
Yes.
In particular, the first case, June 1991, which took place in Blackmill in South Wales, and South Wales being a hotspot, at Bridge End.
Indeed.
You care to tell us about that one, Dave?
Yeah, it's an absolutely stunning case. This, first of all, there's multiple witnesses involved, and also, what they saw was quite impressive, both in its look and the movement pattern. It was 6:30 p.m. in the evening, and
so it was broad daylight.
Yes, it was. It was just. Sun was just starting to set. There was a man, his wife, and 2 friends, and they were out to visit a local Indian restaurant on the outskirts of Blackmill, and they were on the A4093. Yes. And what they were doing, they were driving down a shallow hill. There was a bit of other traffic around, not too many cars. And opposite them was a number of farmers' fields on another slope facing the other way. And they saw a very, very brightly glowing silver sphere. The light coming off this thing was absolutely massive. It was, you said it looked like an arc welding torch. Okay. The object was about 150 to 200 feet in the air, but they could see the hill behind it. So it wasn't a very distant object. They could tell that it was in front of the hill, so quite low down.
We've got 4 witnesses then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they all saw the object. They were absolutely stunned by it, by the look and the brightness coming off this thing, and it was just hovering there. It wasn't completely still. It was actually wobbling a bit, which I've actually had that mentioned in other cases I've looked into. Some people, myself included, believe that might be the field that the object surrounds itself with, that allows it to hover and perform manoeuvres in our atmosphere. So
one of the witnesses used the F word.
Yes, he said, "What the effing hell's that?"
Yeah.
And then the other witnesses. So he was the first one to see it as they came down the hill.
Right. Okay.
So they looked at this object, and it was there wobbling left to right a bit for about 20 seconds, and then without warning, the thing shot off in a southwesterly direction. Absolutely incredible speed. He said hundreds of miles an hour. It was gone in a second. They all saw it go.
Right.
Obviously, that means it can't have been anything normal or conventional in any way. It can't have been a floating balloon or some sort of other vehicle or normal aircraft like a helicopter. The speed was absolutely incredible. It shocked them all quite a lot, and they went out and had their meal, but they were quite quiet for the majority of the evening because they were all thinking about what they'd seen, and realised that it didn't fit into anything normal or conventional in any way.
And some key characteristics there, Dave. The light, the intense light, which is very common.
Indeed.
And the dynamics.
Although not so common in daylight hours, it's quite interesting
Right.
that it was glowing brightly in daylight hours.
Right.
Because usually these craft tend to glow after dark.
Right.
When they're in daylight, they're usually just sort of solid silver or other colours. So it's interesting. But it was starting to get to dusk, so it would have picked up the brightness. It was extremely bright.
And the acceleration again is another characteristic which we'll see.
Yeah, it's a decider for me, that one. I actually look at the movement of these objects sometimes more than the actual appearance, because looks can of course be deceiving, and something which looks like a hovering object could in fact just be nothing more than a blimp or a balloon at a distance. However, when the thing shot off at that speed, that put all those explanations out of the question, I found.
All right. Okay, then Dave, let's come on to the next case, which is near my neck of the woods, Bedlington, Northumberland.
Yeah.
Fairly recent, the 12th of May 2010.
Yes.
The good points were that it was a close encounter, the appearance, possible direct interaction.
Absolutely, yeah. This was a lady who had decided to buy one of these astronomy laser pointers that you fire up at the sky to point out stars, and she'd watched.
So that's like a green laser beam that you can buy. Does that sit on a tripod then, or?
No, it's a handheld. It's a handheld device. So you can shine it up into the sky like you would a powerful torch.
Right.
And it goes out quite a distance. You can see the line, and it's used by astronomers usually to sort of point out individual star systems.
Right.
Now she'd watched a number of clips on the internet, night vision clips, apparently showing people communicating with UFOs using these devices. They were shining them up, and there were objects at high up, very high altitude, that appeared to be flashing in response to what they were doing with the pointers. I've no idea of the. I'm aware of a number of researchers who've released videos such as that, but as I don't know exactly which one, I won't mention any names there. So she decided to get one of these and try this out. She didn't have a massive interest in the UFO. In the UFO field or anything, but she saw these videos and she thought, why not? I'll get hold of one of these devices and try it out myself. Right. So it got to the evening of the 12th of May, and it was a very clear evening. It was the first clear evening that it had been since she'd bought the device. It was quite late. It was early in the early hours of the morning, and about 1:20 a.m. And family were asleep upstairs. She decided.
Today I have travelled down to Telford, where I am giving a talk at the Oaken Gates Theatre, and I've taken this opportunity to meet up with Dave Hodrian. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks very much.
And Dave is the chairman of Birmingham UFO Group. Now, about a year ago, I was getting a lot of UFO cases reported to me via my website, and I was getting far too many that I was able to deal with. So I tried to find somebody who's trustworthy, who could deal with these cases, and I contacted Dave and showed me the Birmingham UFO Group website, which I was very impressed with. Yeah. And just give us a domain name first, Dave.
It's www.B.U.F.O.G.com, B.U.F.O.G.
Okay, and on that website, I discovered that you had a mechanism by which people could give their UFO and contact experiences over to you via a contact form. Yeah. So basically, I just plagiarized that, put it on my own website, and then forward the information to yourself. Yes. And although I've got visibility of that, I get to see all of these reports. I've effectively offloaded it onto yourself. Yeah. And over the last year, we've had probably over 100 cases.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you've picked out the most interesting ones that we're going to go through today. Yes. Now, just give us a bit about your background first, Dave, and how you got into this subject.
Right. I've been interested in the paranormal since quite an early age, really. Started off with just everything really, UFOs, ghosts, psychic abilities, the whole works. Read a lot of paranormal books, but from about the age of 11 or 12 I started to get more of an interest specifically in the UFO subject. Started reading about cases and thinking that there seemed to be quite a good amount of evidence to back them up. And the cases that I read about, the witnesses seemed straight up about what they'd seen. So I started looking into it in more depth. I started going to UFO conferences from about the age of 16.